Okay, hey Laura, it's Jeff. I'm just going to quickly show you how to get set up with a Amazon EC2 virtual machine, how to install a web server on it, how to install a database server on it, how to configure it to use PHP in case you wanted to go the PHP route. I'll show you how to build a very simple comments form in PHP just to prove that PHP is working. And then I'll also show you how to set up a Tomcat server in case you wanted to use Java server pages instead of PHP. And all of this we'll do hopefully in under 20 minutes. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is go to aws.amazon.com and sign up for an account. Now what they offer here is called a free usage tier. And what this gives you is basically a free virtual machine for 12 months. Okay, so they give you a Linux micro instance. It's basically a very small virtual machine that has 613 megs of RAM, and it can either be 32 or 64 bits. The RAM's not very much. However, for the purpose of a CS2212 project, this is way more than enough, so it'd be no problem whatsoever. So they give you 750 hours per month for 12 months, which means basically you can run this virtual machine continuously for an entire year and you won't pay anything. Now, the catch is that an AWS account requires a valid credit card, and this is going to be a problem for students because some of them might not have credit cards. Now, they don't actually charge you anything because they have this free usage tier, but if you were to ever go over this, then they need to have a credit card on file so that they can charge you. So the problem here is that, again, students might not have credit cards. So the solution is that they have this AWS, Amazon Web Services in Education program, that you fill out this simple form here, and they will give you a teaching grant that will give you $100 in Amazon credits for each of your students, and that'll be good for up to a year. So you'd have to apply once every summer for the upcoming year, and yeah, you should be able to get free virtual machines for all of your students. So you just have to fill out this form. It requires you to enter your email. It can be a .edu or equivalent. So this is valid in Canada or anywhere else in the world. It doesn't have to be an edu account. And it does require you to have an Amazon Web Services account already. So you will have to sign up and enter a credit card and then give them the email address that you used to sign up for Amazon Web Services. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I'm happy to put it on my credit card. That's not a problem whatsoever. Just say the word. So it asks you for your course URL and the number of students. So you'd want to give them the number of students that you're expecting to have for the entire year. So if you get like 50 per semester, then put in 100 here. All right. So what it says in the FAQ here is that you apply with this form, they review your application, and if your grant's accepted, they'll notify you via email. They'll send you a link to a site where you can redeem the credits and get all the accounts set up for your students. So I realize this is kind of a pain in the butt, but I think that the benefits here really outweigh the disadvantages. I think this could be, I should say, a great learning experience for the students. So, assuming that you have an Amazon Web Services account set up, then what you want to do is go to My Account, click on the AWS Management Console, and simply log in. So I'm going to log in here, and we'll go to Amazon EC2. That's where you manage your virtual machines. And then I'm going to click on Launch Instance. I want to start up a new virtual machine. I'll click Continue. And what they give you here is a list of predefined virtual machine images that you can use. So I'm going to go to Community AMIs. I'm going to set up a virtual machine using Ubuntu. And I just happen to know the AMI ID. It's the virtual machine ID for this particular image that I want to use. So I just type that in, and it just takes a minute to pull it up. Okay, there we go. So now I'm just going to click on Select, and I'm going to make sure that Micro is selected, and you can see here that it's free tier eligible, so I'm not going to be charged anything for it. So I'm going to click on Micro Instance, leave everything else as is, and then I'm going to click this box that says Prevention Against Accidental Termination. What this does, okay, the default on EC2 is that if you were to shut down your virtual machine, then the default on EC2 is that they delete it. It goes away, it's gone. By enabling this termination protection, it basically, if you were to shut it down, then it would just be stopped and you could restart it again later if you wanted to. So I'll just check that. And I'm just going to give it a name here. So I'll say CS2212 server for group 1. Continue. Okay, it's going to ask me to create a key pair. So I'll create a new key pair here. I'll call it, say, CS2212. This key pair is what I'm going to use to SSH into my server, because they don't use password authentication. So I'm going to click on Create and download my key pair. And you can see it just downloaded that key pair for me. So we'll get to that later. And now it's going to ask you to choose a security group. This is basically the firewall. I created a blank firewall here for this demo just because the existing firewall that I have already has a bunch of settings in it, so I just wanted to start fresh. But you would just select default. So I'm just going to click this and click Continue. And everything's set to go, so I'll click on Launch. So it says it's now launching. I'll click on Close and go to my Instances list. And you can see here that my CS2212 server is starting up. It's in the pending state, and it just takes a minute for it to start up. Now, while that's going on, I'm going to grab my key here that I just downloaded, and I'm going to SCP it to Obelix. So I'll copy it up to Obelix so that it's ready. I'm going to do this entire demo from Obelix. You could certainly do it from your own system. On Windows, you'd have to use Cygwin. On Linux or Mac, you just open up a terminal. But I'll do it from Obelix because I imagine a lot of students would be doing it from Obelix as well. So you can now see that my 2212 server is running. So I'm going to SSH into Obelix, and I'm going to just click on this server here in my console and grab its host name. Okay, so there's the host name, and I'm going to try SSHing into it. Now the user that I have to SSH into as is Ubuntu. So I'll say SSH Ubuntu at EC2, blah, blah, blah. And you can see it's not working. Now the reason is that we have to go into the security group here, and we have to allow the SSH port. So I'm just going to say inbound SSH, add rule, and then apply. And now I've opened up the SSH port in my security group. Now you would have clicked on default. I created this CS2212 security group, but you would click on default and add the rule there. Okay, so I'll try that again, and you can see now it's listening and it gives me permission denied, and that's because I have to use that CS2212 key that I downloaded from them. So I'm going to say SSH-I, give it the file name of the key file, and then Ubuntu at that host name, and you can see that I am now SSH'd in. And if I just take a look here, df-h, you can see that it's given me an 8 gig partition, so there's plenty of space there for the students. Now, I'm just going to exit out of here for a second. I don't want to have to type every single time SSH-I, blah, 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 blah. So what I'm going to do is go into my .ssh directory on Obelix. I'm going to move that key into that directory, and I'm going to create a file called config. And I'm going to say host. Now, right here I can put whatever alias I want to use for this server. So I'm going to use the alias EC2, and the host name is going to be that big long host name. The user is going to be Ubuntu, and the identity file is going to be /.ssh cs2212.pem, that PEM file that we downloaded from Amazon. So now if I save this, I can simply type SSH EC2 from the console, and I'm in. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've got the server up and running, we need to install some software on it. We need to install a web server, a database server, get PHP configured. So I'm going to switch to the root user by saying sudo su. Now I'm root, and I'm going to say apt-get install Apache 2. We need the Apache web server. We need PHP. We need the module, the PHP module for Apache, and then we'll install MySQL server as well for the database server. So it's going to ask me if I want to do it. I say yes, hit enter, and we'll just let it install for a second. Okay, so it asks me for the root password that I want to use for MySQL, so I'll just enter something. Enter it again. Okay, so now that we have everything installed, I'm just going to clear the screen here, and then I'm going to restart Apache just to make sure that PHP is properly enabled by saying service Apache 2 restart. That just restarts the web server. And the last thing I want to do, you don't have to do this, but it's good practice to run this mysql_secure_installation script. So it's going to ask you for your root password. I enter that. I don't want to change it, so I say no. And it asks me if basically I'm just locking down my database server here. So I'm going to remove my anonymous users, I'm going to disable root login remotely, and I'm going to remove the test database and access to it and reload my privileges table. So you don't have to do that, but it just locks it down. It's just higher security basically. Okay, so now we want to see if this web server is up and running and working. So once again, I'm just going to grab that host name for that server, and I'm going to go and try and access it. But you can see here that it's just sort of doing nothing. The reason for that is that we have to open up port 80. So I go into my security groups. Again, you'd be clicking on default. I'm clicking on CS2212 here. And I'm going to go create a new rule, and I want to create one for HTTP. I want to allow the HTTP port 80. Click on Apply Rule Changes. And now let's see if we refresh this page. You can see that it's working now. It's actually responding. Perfect. Okay, so we want to quickly create some sort of PHP app just to make sure that it's working. So I'm going to MySQL, log in as the root user, and I'm going to specify a password since I set a root password. So I'll enter that. And let's create a database here. Create database CS2212, use CS2212, and then I'm going to create a simple comments form. So I'll create a comments table, and it'll have an integer ID, not null. That'll be its primary key, so we'll have auto increment here. And we'll take the user's name, which will make, say, a varchar 255 characters, not null. And then the body of the comment will be text, not null. And then finally, the primary key will be the ID, and that should do it. So we've got the comments table created. Now we have to create a user, because we don't want to use our root MySQL user in this comments app, because that would be insecure. So I'll say create user, we'll call it 2212db user at localhost, identified by, and then a password. So the password, I'll say CS2212 for life. All right, and then we have to grant all privileges on our CS2212 database, all tables within the CS2212 database, to 2212db user, that user we just created, 2212db user at localhost. And then the last thing I have to do is just flush the privileges to get them to take effect. All right, so the database is set up, and now we're going to create the actual comments form. So by default on Ubuntu, Apache stores all of its files in /var/www. So I'm going to edit this index.html file, and I'll just quickly put in a comments form. So HTML, the body tag, create our form action equals, we'll say it's going to post to a file called comments.php. The method is post. And then we'll have name, input type equals text, name equals name. And then we'll have the comment. And that'll be a text area with, say, 10 rows, 80 columns. And its name will be body. And then we just need our submit button. Input type equals submit. All right, close out our form, close out our body, close out the HTML page. So if I reload that, just make sure it works, perfect. So now we just have to create the comments.php file. So I'll go in here and create this, start it off, and we're going to have our DB hostname as localhost. Our database username we said was 2212db user. Our DB password, we set to be CS2212 for life. And our database name, we created the database as CS2212. Okay, so I need to connect to the database, so I'm going to grab a handle to the database, MySQL connect, DB hostname, pass the DB username, pass the DB password, and if that doesn't work, then we'll die with an error message. And we'll get MySQL to print out the error message that occurred. Okay, assuming that worked then, we'll select the database with MySQL select DB. And I'm going to grab the parameters that have been posted to my form. So post name and the body of the comment. body. And then finally I'll say, try inserting it. Insert into comments, name body values. Name, whoops, body. Alright, and obviously this is totally insecure. I'm not doing any sort of input validation, so somebody could totally do an SQL injection attack, but this is just for testing. So, assuming that worked, we're going to print out a simple message that says, I don't know, thank you, and your comment was received. And if that didn't work, then I'm going to print out an error message that just says error. We're sorry, but your request could not be completed at this time. Okay, and then we'll just close out our PHP block here, and we should be good to go. So we'll switch back to our web server here. Jeff Shantz, hello world, submit. And nothing happens. Now what happened was there was an error that happened behind the scenes, and we can take a look at that by looking up var log apache error.log. And you can see we have this PHP fatal error call to undefined function MySQL connect. Now I did this intentionally, and the reason I did this is I wanted to show you why one of the benefits of having a virtual machine. If they were to be doing this, say, on Obelix, they would have to be looking at a log that was maybe shared with a lot of different users, and so all sorts of error messages would be intertwined. By having their own server, they can look at their logs and they can know that, yeah, this is an error that came from my script. Okay, so I just think it's nice to have their own system that they can play with and get to understand how things work behind the scenes. Okay, so we have this call to undefined function MySQL connect, and that's because I didn't install the connector that tells PHP how to connect to MySQL. So I'm going to say apt-get install php5-mysql. That'll get installed. And now I simply have to restart Apache, service Apache to restart. My web server is restarted, and I should be able to now go back, submit my form, and you can see I get my thank you. And if we just confirm that in the database, use CS2212, select star from comments, you can see that my comment has been inserted. So PHP is working properly, everything's great. Okay, so that's how you set up Apache and PHP. Assuming you wanted to go the route of Java server pages, you would need to use Tomcat instead of Apache. So I'm going to first just remove Apache. I wouldn't have to remove it, I could have stopped it, I guess. Okay, and instead I'm going to install Tomcat 7. So this is an application server. There are lots of different JSP application servers like WebSphere and I don't know, JBoss and stuff like that, but Tomcat is free, it's pretty lightweight, so it's probably the one to use. So this will just take a minute to install. It's installing Java, it's installing Tomcat, and all the dependencies for it. Okay, by default, Tomcat runs on port 8080, so if you wanted to access it, you would have to go to port 8080 on this host. And again, you can see it's not responding, and that's because we have to go to our security group here and allow 8080. Now 8080 is not in this list, so I'm just going to create a custom rule, type in 8080 for the range, click on add, and then apply. And now when I go back here and I click on reload, there we go. So now it's working with Tomcat. Now it's not very nice to have it running on port 8080. It would be nicer if it were just running on port 80 so that we could just type in something like this. You can change Tomcat to run on port 80, but if you want to do that, it has to run as the root user, and it's not very secure. It's not usually recommended. So instead, what the hack is that you just redirect port 80 to port 8080, so that Tomcat can be running on port 8080, and any requests that come in on port 80 will be redirected to it. So this is just something that the students could just copy and paste. They don't really need to understand this. I'm just creating an IP tables rule to redirect from port 80 to port 8080. All right, and then I'm just going to say IP table save to make sure if we were to reboot this virtual machine, that rule would still be in effect. So now I should be able to go here and And look at that, I don't have to specify the port anymore. So again, Tomcat is still running on port 8080, but I'm just using this firewall rule to redirect port 80 to port 8080. Okay, so what do we want to do next? Well, we want to be able to access our console here. So it comes with a manager web app that you can use to deploy .war files, to deploy JSP applications to the server, but you have to create a user in order to be able to access that. So I'm going to edit the file etc tomcat, and it's tomcat-users.xml. So I'm going to go under this tomcat users tag, and I'm going to create a user. We'll give it the username of Jeff, and the password we'll just say is admin123. Roles, the roles will be manager-GUI and admin-GUI. Again, this is just something that the students could copy and paste into their file. Okay, so we save that up, and I just have to restart the Tomcat server. So I'll say etc init tomcat7 restart, and that restarts it. Okay, and I should be able to... You know what? I just realized that I forgot to install tomcat7-admin. So I have to install the admin site. So I just installed that. I'm going to restart my Tomcat server again. Sorry about that. And once it's started up, I can now go back, click on the Manager web app. It asks me for the username and password. I'll put in the one I just created, Jeff admin123. And now I'm into the application manager, and so this is where you can see all the applications that are running on the server, and you can deploy a new application. So the students would compile their JSP application into a WAR file, and they would simply upload the file and deploy it, and then it would be listed as one of the applications in this list, and they could play with it. I'm not going to get into that right now, but hopefully you get the picture. Alright, so that pretty much covers it. I'm not sure if I got under my 20 minutes or not, but yeah. Hopefully you can see that this is really not that hard, and I think the students could totally handle it, and I think it'd be a great learning experience for them. All right, talk to you later.